Action, reaction, guys. This is, in a nutshell, a demonstration of why this stuff works. You can do this with your students. If you do it with airsoft or something, have a full helmet on, have all that jazz, but you can get a pretty good demonstration of why it works. There's a reason I mentioned that. If you want to hear a funny story, ask me. So over here, I'll explain to the students, this is the drill. I want you to, when we're ready to do the drill, I want you to say bang, it'll be your signal. That's why it works, okay? Action versus reaction. In a sport fight, action versus reaction is less important. Why? Do I know I'm going to be in a fight?
Yes.
Do I know what time it starts?
Yes.
Do I know what the rules of engagement are?
Yes.
Do I know how many guys I'm fighting?
Yes.
I know all this, right? This is less important. So, and in my opinion, sport fighting is a lot harder than real self-defense fighting because the other person, they heads up. They know what they're going to do. They've been training, going to be about their size. They have hopefully a similar skill level. That to me is a lot harder than what we have to do on the street, right? Scarier on the street and different. We'll talk about emotional content in a minute. But Bruce did not know I was going to do that disarm. And I'm explaining the drill to him. When I'm ready, when I tell you to go, we'll go. Then he's thinking, okay, great. And I have a point that got in my face, right? Could you have gotten the shot off? Or did you even move to pull the trigger? Right. Now, if somebody comes up to you at an ATM and points the gun at the back of your head, are they thinking, this guy's probably a crop black belt. He's going to try to turn, I know he's going to turn around and try to disarm me. I know it. He's not thinking of it, right? He's probably done this before. They put a gun on you and thinking you're going to do whatever they tell you to do because you're scared to death. They're half right, you'll be scared to death. But the gun's on you, right? When I go to act, when I go to move, he is so far behind the curve that the odds of him catching up are pretty darn slim, okay? Pretty darn slim. I saw a robbery, it was an attempted robbery recently. The guy comes out with a shotgun, points it at a guy in the street. This is real, this is not a training video. Did we watch this?
Yeah.
Great video. The guy's like, you can see it in his face, he's like, no, I'm not taking this. He's not trained to disarm, you can tell when he reacts, but he attempts it. He goes, he grabs the barrel and pushes it down. Pretty much like our variation on that, right? And he starts, let me fight for it. He punches it a couple times and fights for it. You know what the guy with the gun does? He drops the gun and runs away. It takes so long for that person to react to your action, okay, that they're super behind the curve. That's why we're big on this, boom, we explode and we go right to it. By the time he realizes that we're trying to disarm, I would like for him to have been punched in the face 3, 4, or 10 times before he actually gets his head in the game, right? Has anybody heard of the OODA loop? OODA loop, yes. Boyd circle, okay, everybody? Yes. Okay, really brief talk on that, but OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. Right? For any human being to react to a stimuli, whatever that is, we first have to observe it. We have to see it coming, smell it, hear it, something. We first have to observe. Then we have to orient to it. We have to, what is that? So once we realize what is that, then we have to decide what to do about it. Once we decide what to do about it, we have to act. Right? We train so that we come out of that circle super fast. Right? We train that so when we grab here, that's why we don't want you waiting, okay, there it is, there, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. That's why when the hair, that's why we want you to go. We're training you to move through Boyd's circle super fast. Most people don't do that. Right? They move through Boyd's circle super slow. We really want to take advantage of that concept. In my law enforcement training, my handcuffing is built around action reaction. It's built around the OODA loop, Boyd's circle. And when I teach police officers to handcuff, what I teach them to do, more importantly than the actual application of the cuffs, is to put that cat into the loop. Put that cat in the loop. By the time we got that first cuff going on, he's going, oh, I'm getting handcuffed. What's going on? Cool. And people remark in my line of work, man, nobody ever fights you. When you're cuffing them, nobody ever fights you. It's because they don't know they're being cuffed until that first cuff is on, and I'm about to put the second one on. And her other officers say, screw it. I'll just fight them. I'm getting them in a cuff one way or another. You do that. You go out in injury. You get into a fight. You do that. I'm going to trick them to the handcuffs every time if I can. Right? I'll line my way through it. I'll trick them, and I'll get them in the loop, and I'll put them in the back. So when I'm handcuffing a suspect, I try to create an environment where they think the last thing that's going to happen is that they're going to get handcuffed. How you doing? Thanks for your time. Here you go. Here's your license back. Get on your way. I try to mentally create a situation where they're thinking, okay, I'm leaving. No big deal. And then when I hand them that, I'm going to put the cuffs on, they're going, wait, what's going on? I'm going to put the cuffs on. So I'm trying to take advantage of that process. It's the same thing we're learning to do here. We're learning to keep somebody in the loop and defeat them while they are in the loop. That's why this stuff works, guys. And it's easy, people watch YouTube videos and they say, well, I would do this, and I would do that, and I would do that. Would you? You're a fine choreographer. Thank you for doing that. But in a real-world self-defense situation, we don't have time to choreograph. Did anybody see a good example of this in a sport fight? Benson Henderson versus Anthony Pettis, the first fight. Anybody see it? Anthony Pettis pulls they call it the Showtime kick now, but basically he runs to the fence. He hits it, he jumps off and pow, lands his head kick on Benson Henderson. It was beautiful and it will never work again. Not going to work again. I'll lay down money on that, right? The reason it's not going to work again is that everybody that steps in the ring with Anthony Pettis is going, I didn't know that cage, man. He bounced it off that cage. There's no action-reaction. And when you watch Benson Henderson, when they slow that down, he goes like this. He's watching him throw the kick, right? That wasn't, in Benson Henderson's mind and everyone else's on the planet, that was not within the realm of possibility. That wasn't going to happen because it's not the Matrix, right? But he did. He ran to the fence. Benson's going, what the hell is he running to the fence? He's throwing that kick right at my head. While he's still in the loop. He's one of the best fighters on the planet, hands down. While he's still looking at the kick coming at him, it lands. And he's out. And it happens in a split second. He didn't even move to react. One of the best fighters on the planet. It didn't even, that's all he had to do, really. Put a hand up and he'd been saved, but he didn't do it. Because he's a human being. Because the human brain works the same way every time. But again, anybody that gets in the ring with Pettis now is going to be expecting that, right? Ain't going to happen again. I'll put money down on it. So action-reaction is a very big deal, guys. It is essentially why what we do works. Action versus reaction, right? Emotional content. We'll talk about primacy and recency and reaction. Emotional content is a big deal, right? For who was stressed for the test today? Who felt some stress going into the test yesterday? A bunch of people with hands up and then a bunch of liars. Okay, good. So we're stressed, right? If you've ever done any sport fighting, even if it's just grappling, naga, or judo, or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you're stressed. I don't care how many times you've done it. There's some level of anxiety. When George St. Pierre goes into the cage, he's got terrible nerves. He sees a sports psychologist because of it. Right? He's nervous. He's scared. He's scared because he's going into a fight. You should be scared. That's what a fight is, right? It's pretty darn scary. So when we fight with emotional content, this is different from sport fighting. In sport fighting, I got to fight how long? 9 minutes, 15 minutes, 12 minutes? But I know potentially how long I'm going to fight, so I'm going to do what?
Train.
And during the course of that fight, will I pace myself?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll pace myself. All right. In a real-world self-defense situation, how long am I going to fight?
A couple minutes.
So you're done.
I don't know, right? Until I'm done. Might that be 5 seconds? Might that be 30 seconds? Might be a few minutes. I'll tell you though, if you don't train for it, a 2 or 3 minute real fight is a long time. And I train my police officers all the time, and not police officers, but they don't train. Very few police officers train as they should train. And when I hear my guys go, I'm fighting one, I got it, 30 minutes later, and that's the way it sounds. And we kind of laugh at it, but it scares the hell out of me. It keeps me awake at night. These are the guys and girls that I work with. And in 30 seconds, they're exhausted. And it's going to take me another 90 seconds to get to them. That scares me. What can happen in 90 seconds? A whole life can end in 90 seconds. In one of those 90 seconds, a whole life can end. So on to emotional content. When I fight, it must be with no mercy. It must be with absolute conviction. It must be with as much cruelty as I can possibly manage in that period of time. Violence of action. I cannot overstate the importance of it. This isn't as important in a sport fight, but it's still important. In a real fight, it's everything. If you tell me, all right, you've got to fight this Hapkido master, he's won a bazillion tournaments, really nice guy. Okay, great. You got to fight this meth addict, he's the meanest son of a bitch I've ever seen in my life. He bit a dude's face off and ate it. I'm going to go, ooh, give me the Hapkido master. We're going to fight. I would much rather fight a highly trained martial artist, professional fighter, whatever, who is not mean, than somebody with no training who is the meanest person I've ever seen in my life. I fought a 15-year-old girl as a bailiff when I worked for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, who probably weighed 100 pounds, very small, and was horrible. It is the worst fight I've ever had on the street because she's the meanest human being I've ever come in contact with in my life. She tried to stick her fingernails in my eyes. She tried to bite me in the groin. She would have done anything to get away from me. I had scratches. I could not find a surface without a scratch on it. Like, this sucks. I ended up dropping an elbow in the middle of this 100-pound girl's face in order to get her under control. 100 pounds. But mean as sin. Okay, the guys that trumps almost everything. The guy who is mean, right? One of the first fights I ever get on in the street, the guys with me are looking at me funny after. This is tough. Good little scrap. A minute and a half. But I'm going against the guy who everybody said was a badass and he hurt people and all that stuff. So the people I'm with, gosh, I think I was selling it to you. I might have just got off it. But the people I'm with are looking at me after and they're kind of doing this. And Later on that night, people were hardly talking to me. Later on that night, my son goes, you know, you scared the hell out of everybody out there. I'm like, why? He goes, you're mean, man. You were growling at that guy. I'm like, yeah, I was. Okay. So for the next, until they got to know me, they were expecting me to go out there and tear people up and do all this jazz, right? I don't. The vast majority of people I come into contact with, I talk to, are polite and professional, and I have a plan to kill them. But I don't need the plan, because I'm polite and professional and we get it done that way. But when you fight, guys, and I can't overstate this, one of the things I can't give you, Mandy's been in some crazy real world situations, right? One of the things I can't give you is perspective. I can't let you know, I can't teach you how unbelievably, mind-bogglingly, soul-crushingly fast this stuff happens in the real world. It is blinding. Right? You will, for days, if you ever find yourself in a nasty, violent encounter, for days and days, you will find yourself trying to piece it back together. God, what happened? What happened there? What did I do? Why did this happen? Because a lot of this stuff happens without conscious thought process. Right? And if we get to primacy and recency, we'll kind of see what that happened. But often, your reactions are not conscious thought processes because there simply is no time. One of the things about police-involved shootings and military-involved shootings that they try to piece together after the fact is that the people, quote-unquote, judging them are sitting there in an air-conditioned room with all the time in the world they need to go through and say what should or should not have happened. If you find yourself in a real-world violent encounter, right, and you should expect the legal system to get involved shortly after that. You're going to have to justify why you did what you did. That's a pretty scary part. But the people looking at that, say somebody pulls a gun, you end up killing that person. Let's say there's some questions about that. There are going to be some questions about that. They're going to be piecing this together over a period of time. One of the good things about law enforcement officers is we get that. You know, we know what's up. But you don't have that benefit. And people, what were you thinking right here? That the answer to that might be nothing. Not a thing. I wasn't thinking. There was no, he's put that gun in my face, I'm going to have to push it off to the side, I'm going to have to, you might just go, oh God, that might be it. That might be the whole process, and there's nothing else behind it. Why might there be nothing else behind it? Primacy and reasons. When you are under stress and you're reacting to anything, any stressful, any violent thing, your brain will immediately go for what's most recent or what's primary. Okay? You will start to cycle through the options. Somebody attacks you, and very often you see somebody attack, you see them get into the fetal position, they're just sitting there, they're freezing. Okay? That's because they don't have a primary ingrained response. And it's never happened before. There's nothing recently in my memory banks that I can access to tell me what to do in response to this. So recency. Recency is not what we want to happen, generally. We want to have a primary response. But recency is, oh my God, I'm being attacked. I got attacked before, and this again, it's not to be conscious. I was attacked before, I gotta get up, Boom. We fight, we get up. So the brain grabs for a recent, similar experience to try to lock onto. Anybody reading books by Rory Miller? Good. Mark's got a Rory Miller seminar scheduled next year.
Yeah, in March 1st and 2nd in Columbus, Ohio.
Read some of the guy's books. Highly recommend listening to this guy, going and doing the seminar. And he talks about his theory on why that is. You know, people say, my life flashed before my eyes. You've heard people say that? His theory on why that is, I don't know if there's any science behind this, but it sounds good, so I'm going to repeat it. He says your brain cycles through everything that has ever happened to you, trying to find an answer to the situation that you're currently facing with.
I think that's
right. So it's like you're playing that reel back in your head. Last time this happened, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? Right? So your brain's kind of searching for that. You can imagine that takes some time, right? Whether that's a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, it takes some time. Now, if somebody put that gun in my face and I went, boom, would that be because of recency? Because recently someone stuck a gun in my face? We had guns stuck in our face all day, didn't we? Didn't we? Training guns were simulating that experience. But while we had those guns stuck in our face, we were really busy ingraining a primary response, weren't we? So every time that came up, we're creating an experience. I just created an experience. There's a gun in my face. What do I do about that? Boom. So the next time, hopefully, first time, maybe never, you get a gun stuck in your face, I promise you there won't be a whole lot of conscious process. And the more you train, and we get that gun, and this is a big one for me, guys. I don't want to, read that, Bruce? I just did this in the drill, but don't let your students train like this. Okay, first I got to push off to the side, and I got to go, and I got to don't let him train like that. When he puts that gun up, when he puts that gun up there, get it. As soon as that gun pops up, get it. Thank you. Go after it. Let them train that. And I say this all the time, as in frog, we're teaching our, don't let this sink in. As soon as you see it, go for it. As soon as you go for it. Don't let there be a delay. Don't go through a conscious thought process. As soon as you can get your students out of that step-by-step mentality, get them into that reaction. We want that to be the primary response based on their most recent experience with that particular problem. Does that make sense? If we can get them to a primary ingrained response, they will have something to go to lightning fast. So they move through action and reaction lightning fast. The faster they move through that, the faster they get to safety. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Okay. Having said all that, go back to this. You got to be mean. You got to be meaner than a junkyard dog. Sometimes you got to get lucky, and you got to have primary and recent response. If you have those things going, you are so far ahead of everyone else on the planet that doesn't, that the odds of you being safe are pretty darn good. Most people, me and Terry were having this conversation earlier, whether you get to black belt and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Krav Maga and all that, whether you get through all that, the mere fact of your presence here, the fact that you are dedicating yourself to this training and learning these things puts you miles ahead of where anybody else is going to be. Okay? But for me, the fight always goes back to emotional content. All right? When I step into a sport fight, Russ, were you mad in any of your fights?
No, not really.
I wasn't either. I had very few sport fights where I was angry. Why? Because I agreed to be there. I said, okay, today I'll do that. Here we go. I get a little mad, kind of walk, oh, that hurt. But it's never an outright anger in a sport fight, right? And I made it, when I was fighting, I made a point of trying to hurt people because the fight ended faster, and then I was safe. But there it is. We've agreed to be here. I've given my consent to be here. Here, in a real-world violent encounter, I have not given my consent. It's a violation. It's a violation of my sanctity, my personal sanctity and security. And if you find yourself the subject of a real violent encounter, you're going to get pissed off. Or you're going to fold. I hate to put it that way, but that's the reality. You're going to get pissed off, and nothing in the world is going to be more important to you than smashing the motherfucker in front of you, or you're going to fold. And there's a great video I want to show it to you all. Maybe they feel that we can show this video because it's a little bit lengthy, but it's a debrief, a review of the North Hollywood shootout, which is one of the worst law enforcement shootouts in the history of our nation. I'm sure you guys saw this on the news at some point. Two heavily armored guys go in, they take a bank. There's a huge shootout with LAPD. It lasts forever. It finally gets ended when some mean-ass SWAT guys show up and go, now we're going to go kill those people. Okay, so that's when it's finally ended. But the general response was, we'll create a perimeter, we'll wait, and everything was being decided by the mean son of guns in the body armor, right, who apparently weren't afraid to die. So they're kind of taking the fight too. There's a really interesting interview with two officers, and I don't mean to disparage an officer, it's not what I'm saying. But they had very similar experiences. Both were wounded by gunfire from an AK-47. Very similar types of wounds. You're watching the interview after the fact, and one police officer is going, the sound of that AK-47 was hell. It kept going off, and I knew I was going to die. He got wounded, and he sat in the same spot the whole time, waiting for somebody to come get him. Okay? He's retired. He immediately retired. He left. He's gone. Okay? Fine, great. He's in a hellish situation. I don't mean to judge him, but we go view the other, interview the other officer, and the other officer is sitting like this. He's going to remember when I took that first wound, it went through, and I thought, that's a bad one. He goes, what can I do to manage it? What can I apply a tourniquet? What can I do? But then I see the guy walking toward another crowd of people there, and I'm behind the patrol car, and I'm thinking, okay, how can I get in a position to shoot this guy? How can I get in a position to stop him before he gets there? You see the difference there? All that second guy wanted to do was kill that son of a bitch. Right. He stopped thinking, am I going to die? What's going to happen? If in a real-world violent encounter, we see this all the time, we see police after the fact, and even a lot of police officers who don't understand the impact of real-world violence encounters say these things. I was just thinking, you see these things, we know there are cops that died, there are cops that got lucky and lived, and there are cops that lived because they finished the fight. I'm glad the lucky ones lived. But we're interviewing the lucky ones, and they're going, I was thinking about my wife and my kids, I was never going to see them again, and God, you still see them, there's still that pain there. And you see the officers like, that son of a bitch was trying to take me away from my family, and that wasn't going to happen. I was going to kill that guy, and that's all I had in my head. I can promise you, I love my wife, I love my kids. When I get into a fight on the street, the last thing I think about is my wife and my kids. That's why I'm going to win. That's why I'm going to win every time. If any of those ridiculous thoughts pop in your head, push them out. They have no place. When you are here fighting with another person for your life, the universe is that big. That's it. That's all that exists. There is nothing outside of it. There can't be, because your only purpose for existing in that moment, when you're faced with that violent encounter, is winning. Winning. That's it. You got to stop the other guy. There's no room for anything else. Not for hunger, not for thirst, not for fatigue, not for sorrow, not for fear, not for regret. All those things are there, but you have to become the solution to the problem. The universe is no bigger than that. It is contained in that, and that is all that matters. Does that make sense to everybody? Has anybody read On Combat by David Grossman? No? Yeah. Good book. And this is not a criticism. This is just an example that I wrote this on one of my blogs of how long humans have been thinking about this. But we read On Combat, and I think it's a good book. On Killing was his first book, I think, but it was, I think it's more widely known. But On Killing is very much an academic kind of review and research book on the act of killing and the psychological impact that it has, largely in a military setting, in a military type of combat setting. Well, let's say Fatima is walking out to the parking lot tonight. She goes to Publix, gets a sub, she's going back to her car, and she gets attacked. Some guy starts punch her in the face. Is that combat? Better believe it. That's combat. That's what that is. That is no joke. I could be killed out here. This is combat, right? This is not a ring. There are no rules. You got to instantly turn into the meanest son of a bitch that ever walked the face of the earth. And that's where you got to get. So you read Grossman's second book, On Combat. This one is more police-oriented. Now, what's the difference between police deadly force encounters and military deadly force encounters largely?
It started intelligence encounters.
Someone says it?
It started deadly force encounters.
Didn't necessarily start that way?
Intelligence level of the people you're fighting against.
Could be. For sure, we didn't necessarily know it was going to start that way, right? Or we just shot it before we ever talked. So we didn't necessarily know it was going to be a deadly force encounter. How many people are involved? Do I have any buddies with me? Maybe, maybe not. Odds are it's just me. Might be one other suspect, you and a couple other suspects. How about distance?
Much closer.
Big deal. How about proximity? This is one of my theories on why knives scare me so bad, right? A knife fight might be right here. A gunfight might have a little more distance. But in the military, enemy often, I know it's a blanket statement, is over there. You know, a lot of this research was based on Vietnam, Korea, World War II. The guys in Afghanistan and Iraq now are doing a lot more SWAT type work than traditional military type work. They're going house to house, room to room. So it's a different situation now. But then, those traditional military situations, we had distance, right? Distance it's a difference maker. It's a big deal. You know, if you're shooting a guy that's 100 yards over there, it's different than fighting this guy right here in front of you. Psychologically, it's different. You know, it has a lot more impact than killing somebody from a distance. You know, the guy that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the guys that did that, do you think it's the same impact? They killed a lot of people. A lot of people. Do you think they feel it the same as one police officer who had to kill a guy right here, sweating on him, breathing in his face? It's different. It's a different animal. So, the psychological impact of these things can be profound. But when we think about these things ahead of time, when we prepare ourselves and know that we will go through these emotional processes, it can lessen that burden on us emotionally. Does that make sense to everybody? The fact that we are in here doing this, talking about it, gives us that leg up. That's why we do what we do. Now, I've talked to people before, they say, "You crazy, you know, you're never going to happen that." Never going to happen, right? Is it never going to happen? Now, we live in a peaceful society. Compared to Afghanistan, being in the middle of Bogota, Colombia, being in the middle of a favela in Rio, we're pretty safe. But still it exists, right? So either we can prepare for it, get in shape, be healthy while we're doing it, or we cannot. And we can try to catch up later. But my point on combat, as recent as it is, and as much of that modern information that it brings in, it's a repeat. It's a rehash. If you read Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, written quite some time ago, more than 10 years, you're going to find virtually everything that Grossman wrote about in the Book of Five Rings. He's going to talk about all of those mental processes. He's going to talk about what he went through. And a lot of people in my line of work, in the military or in law enforcement, they lean on Sun Tzu's Art of War, right? Art of War is about strategy. It's high-minded. It's big picture. It's big numbers, right? And we can take it, we kind of extrapolate individual experience to it. But the Book of Five Rings is about, I'm right here, he's right there, we both got a sword, I gotta kill this guy. That's what the Book of Five Rings is about. I recommend reading both. I'm not saying Grossman stole anything, because he didn't. It's a lot of good original work. Where he brings in other people's work, he cites it. It's great. But humans have been thinking about this for that long. There are even older examples of that. You'll find fencing manuals from the Dark Ages, from the Middle Ages in Europe. You'll find this stuff has been going on forever. We're not doing anything new. We're packaging it differently. We're putting our modern perspective on it. But my point here is, great quote from the histories, from the Peloponnesian Wars. Great quote from there is, that nation which separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. The fact that we are the people that we are, it doesn't mean we shouldn't learn outside of our realm, right? If we were purely scholars, we couldn't be good warriors. If we were purely warriors, we might fall short of what our goal is because we don't make scholars of ourselves. There's a world of material out there, guys, and we should read it all. Get our hands on those books, even if it's a Kindle. But get your hands on those things. Absorb all that you can. Learn from everyone that you can, from every angle that you can. That's going to put us that much more ahead when we start to try to apply this stuff. And as I said earlier, I think what makes a good instructor is not just I'm repeating the material that somebody else taught me, but I'm taking my own experience, I'm injecting it, and I'm making it particular. Okay, like Bruce Lee said, keep what is useful, discard what is useless, add what is uniquely your own. Any questions?